Hello, it's the Toaster Party, and today I'm bringing you another budget builder video. This time it's True Draco. True Draco used to be a pillar of budget building when it came to Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it was an extremely effective and cheap deck that has kind of fallen by the wayside because it lost two of its key pieces. That was being, it used to have 3 copies of Draconic Diagram, but due to Lithosagam being put to 1, from 0, then they kind of, in response, put Draconic Diagram to 1. Then also there's Card of Demise, which was also put to 1 from 3, which kind of made the deck fall out of grace. But it's still a very affordable deck that can still do a lot of cool things. Without further ado, let's get into the actual list itself. First up, we have 1 copy of Driver and 3 copy of Gamma. Because there's only 1 copy of Card of Demise now, I started adding a few hand traps to the list, and I wanted to make sure that the ones I did have were the most high impact ones possible, those being Gamma and also Ghost Ogre. Because you can't really afford Nibiru in a budget list, these cards are kind of the best things you can throw in. Then with the actual monster lineup that we intend to use, we have Metaltron 12, the True Draco Combatant. This is sort of like Bad Masterpiece, but Bad Masterpiece is still really good this format. Because this card, whatever you use to tribute it, whether that be monster, spell, or trap, it gains immunity to. This card also combos really well with Crackdown, because you take a copy of your opponent's monster, you then tribute over the monster and the Crackdown, then you just need 1 more material such as a spell, and then you have a Metaltron 12 that's immune to everything. You also have 1 copy of Dynamite Knight, because this card's also 1 for reason still. It lets you search up the 2 different traps, that being Apocalypse and True King's Return. 3 copies of Ignis Heat, which lets you search up some spells. 3 copies of Majesty Maiden, a card that searches up the monsters. The 2 copies of Pot of Desires. I'm only playing 2 because the list is a bit tight, and Desires is a bit worse than Duality in this kind of deck because you can banish off some key 1-ofs, such as Dynamite Knight, Metaltron 12, and the Diagram. But the card's still good to get advantage if you really need it. Then you also have 1 copy of Card of Demise, another really good advantage card, just sadly it won, so you still play it because it's a good card, but just not as good when it's only at 1. 3 copies of Duality, the best way to get to key pieces that you need in your deck, such as your monsters, or hopefully you can pull off a Draconic Diagram. 3 copies of Heritage, the one that lets you draw equal to the amount of different types of True Draco or True King cards that were removed from the field this turn. 3 copies of Anti-Mill Assurance, lets you shuffle back 3 True Draco or True King monsters or cards in your graveyard and shuffle them into the deck, and then draw 1. Draconic Diagram, the search card and massive advantage engine. Also, when any of these spells are popped, they pop back row, and when any of the True Draco traps are popped, then they pop a monster, just so you know. 3 copies of Crackdown, because taking your opponent's monsters is good. 3 copies of the Monarch's Erupt, basically skill drain, but you would just have to have a tribute summon monster, and because all of the True Draco cards are cards that technically tribute summon by tributing over spells and traps, then it counts as a tribute summon monster, so it's skill drain. And you can only do this if you don't have an extra deck, so I just don't play an extra deck because this card is really good. We got 3 copies of True Draco Apocalypse. Sort of a weird battle attack modulation effect, which actually comes up a lot more than you think it would. And the ability to tribute over it to pop opponent's monsters just makes this a really nice card to have. 1 copy of Skill Drain, because we don't want our opponents doing any type of combo shenanigans. And our monster's vanilla attack and defense tends to be higher than what our opponents are doing. And then finally, 3 copies of Rivalry of Warlords. When it came to deciding on which Floodgate I wanted to run, I decided that Rivalry of Warlords seemed to be the best one to run in conjunction with the Monarch's Erupt and Skill Drain. Because in this format, there's a lot of people people who are running decks that don't have one type of monster only. Aside from, well, even Adamantipator's running different types of monsters with trying to do the Halqa-Fibrax line because Warlord Saboteur Dragon is not a rock monster. So just preventing them from getting into that by putting this down or having the opportunity to flip it up during your opponent's turn even when you're going second, if you can somehow force that out, is really good. And then onto the side deck, we have 3 copies of anti-combo deck stuff, like Winged Dragon the Frost Sphere mode to deal with Adamantipator boards, 3 copies of Humongous for decks that play Dragoon, 3 copies of Dinomishus, sort of as a hedge against stuff like Eldritch, to be able to pop their copies of the Bright Lord himself, and 3 copies of Cosmic Cyclone, also for Eldritch. 1 copy of Imperial Order for any decks that heavily rely on spell cards. And then finally, 2 copies of Solemn Judgment. You set this in going first against decks that you feel like you're going to have to face down and evenly match or a Lightning Storm. But otherwise, it feels like okay. But I don't think I'd want to be playing them in the main right now, and they'd work a bit better in the side deck. Well, that's it for the list. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a great day.